Hello, welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome back. If you have, my intention is benevolence for all and the highest levels of love, light, and oneness. And so I'm just going to go into a little bit of flow. So I invite you to close your eyes or get comfortable, take some deep breaths in. Lots of messages have been coming through in general, but I was guided just to sit and go into flow. So here I flow. And as we yield to these incoming waves, we yield a higher frequency. We yield better results. This is a play on words. So again, I need to go back and write some of this down. The transitions are changing us from the inside out. We are literally falling apart at the seams, so to speak. And in our falling inward, and they're saying like falling in love with us, with our truth, with what it is that really brings us joy and makes us happy. We align, we light up, so they're kind of guiding me. There's this, I haven't thought about this in a really long time, but they're showing me rocks, little rocks. And there used to be, Stephen Covey had written this book, like Habits of Successful People, the highly successful habits. Anyways, you guys probably know what I'm talking about. And there used to be this thing where he would call some things little rocks and some things big rocks. And they're also referring back to a dream I had recently where I was walking over a lot of rocks. Like I was walking through a river bed full of rocks, and I was having to kind of move around all of these rocks and get through this water. And it was a little treacherous, but it was exhilarating and also yielding wonderful feelings at the same time. And so they're inviting us to look at our circumstances as victorious right now. And they're kind of showing us to look at these circumstances as rocks that we're essentially moving from one pile into another or moving around to create new experiences out of. And there's a lot more layers to this, so I'm just going to keep going back into flow. As we change our view, our standing position, we then stand in a new line up, a new frequency, disposition, our disposition regarding certain things that may have seemed as if they were an imposition are now no longer imposing upon us as we transpose, transpond, respawn, transition into a new line of trajectory. They're showing me like our whole conceptualization around what is important, how we move the rocks, what rocks are we choosing to focus on. And they're showing me like rocks mean like goals. They mean like goals. We'll just call them goals. As we align ourselves with what it is that we are seeing within, they're showing me an unfolding. It's just unfolding, and it's constantly unfolding. And as something opens and a flower opens, right, we see the stems, and then those fold in and peel back another layer, and they're showing me like this fractal flower, right? As we change our position and our disposition becomes more accepting and less, they're showing me a lot of different things, fight or flight, like combative instead of fighting the current, we're picking our way through it, and we're recognizing that we're in a flow. It may not be the exact flow that we ultimately want to end up in, but we're in the process of bridging a gap. We're in the process of lining things up. And sometimes these rocks have to be moved. We have to work through them sometimes. We can't just throw them away. We can utilize them to build a bridge, to build a dam, and restructure where the water goes, like how beavers work. When you have a beaver and it builds a dam, it changes the flow of the river. As we change our frequency pattern, our flow, and as we follow the flow, our disposition about how things unfold for us will also change. We will no longer taste the bitter of the sweet. We will see the symphony, of course I'm hearing bittersweet symphony, of all of the bubbles that are rising to the surface. Champagne supernova. All of the bubbles that are popping and revealing certain pieces of information in them. So they're showing me balloons, and there's this like game that if you put a message in a balloon and if you sit on it and pop the balloon, the message then is revealed. For we have lined ourselves up for these messages. Now is the time. Had you have popped the bubble earlier, you would have read the message and it would have been in a code that was not able to be processed properly, perhaps. So lots of P's there. But they're showing me like, so it's just like I use the example a lot when I read Eckhart Tolle and I was 30, right? I've read Eckhart Tolle and I was, for my friend had gotten it for me for my birthday. And it didn't make any sense. And then all of a sudden, the following year, I was like, how could I not have seen this? It was sitting in front of me the whole time, this treasure. That book was called A New Earth. As we read and are revealing and revealed the notes that are hidden within the bubbles, the codes, the access points, and they're showing me like not just access points that we're lining up with in a map, but also they're showing me like when you have a laser beam and it's shining on a screen to point out certain highlights of a topic, a conversation, and also this these access points are like footnotes about things like, hey, don't forget that this means this. And we go, oh yeah, I did forget about that. So now I'm able to access it because I'm not looking at it from an Eeyore perspective. I'm looking at it from a Tigger or a Pooh perspective. For our perspectives and our position, our perspectives and our positioning are repositioned in our, so you guys, this is kind of a test right now because I am being guided just to go into flow. Usually I write it this way. I don't speak it this way, although I have a few times. And I have a tendency to second guess the words when I speak them out loud. And I'm sharing that with you guys for a purpose. When we are sometimes we second guess ourselves and it slows down the process. So I'm just going to go for it. Whether I decide to post this video or not will still be determined. As we change our positions on certain subjects based on the new information that is at hand, based on the new access points, reference points, points of material, new materials, old materials that are being presented in a new way because we are, as one, a new entity, and they're showing me like a corporation, like an LLC, or a corporation, like an entity. So we are now different. We are not the same company or entity that we were previously together. That's one layer. That's one expression that is true to one from one perspective, and there's also other perspectives interlaid and interwoven with that. As we access this fuller potential, we recognize we are open to the mathematical inclinations that line us up numerologically, and also on an astrological with numerology layer. So this has to do with dates, it has to do with lineups, it has to do with past, present, future versions of ourselves, it has to do with the positioning of where we are now at this moment in our lives on the earth, in alignment with the sun, in alignment with the planets. It has to do with our current place where we live. It has to do with where we walk barefoot on the earth. Everything is like click, 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 clicking into place. So there's so much coming in right now. It's like the ascended masters and as the ascended masters that walked before us, who also laid out the framework, laid out the time bombs. So I'm seeing mines, when people go through and there's mines that have been left in the ocean, and you have to watch, like it was an old war, and there's still mines that are in that ocean that if you hit them, they could still explode. Even though they were there from centuries ago, as an example, they're showing me that all of this stuff is kind of coming up and bubbling to the surface, not only on the earth, but in our bodies, because we are codexes. We are codexes for memories that are showing up to present themselves in a different, from a different position. So we're in a different position. Okay, so let me just break that down a little bit. Back up. So if we look at things from the position of this is an amazing experience rather than woe is me, it changes how we perceive the information. Therefore, it changes how we receive the information. It changes how quickly we receive the information and how quickly we line up. I talked about this in my previous video with bows and archers, where our trajectory goes, and if we're lining up with our truth in our correct course or in course of. So what they're showing me is a course in miracles. So they're showing me like that's so many ways of lining up. So if we resist it and we look at things from a continued cycle of misinterpretation or negativity, we are then only shooting ourselves in the foot, so to speak. Now, they're also showing me that as we change our position about things, so that's an example of position, right? I chose to be angry before, but now I'm like, you know what, or I don't believe in this. But now I'm changing my position and I'm saying, I do believe in this. And therefore it changes everything. In addition to that, as we change, that changes changing our disposition about something can also change our position on something. So if somebody becomes softer, nicer, their disposition changes, now they're going to hear something and they're not going to be closed-minded and judgmental about it. Therefore, it's going to open Pandora's box. It's going to open much easier, and all of that resistance is going to start to fall away much easier, rather than holding our ground and being stubborn about something that is only in position with old lockups, old lineups, old locks that really are disintegrating. They want me to keep playing with that. So as we change our disposition, we also change our position within our placement on earth, who we're speaking with, and as a collective. So I'm going to go into that a little deeper. If I become like soft and I get happy about things easier and I'm not angry all the time, I'm going to meet more people, and those people are going to activate me faster. I'm going to go more places and I'm going to activate faster, and vice versa. So it has an effect as a collective experience, which then pulls the whole collective into a different placement or a different disposition, and pulls it into a different position in alignment with certain trajectories, timelines, thought processes, inventions, discoveries, rediscoveries, activations. Like everybody wants disclosure. Well, if we follow the flow and we don't and we're not so negative about things, the simplistic way of what they're saying from one viewpoint, very multidimensional here, is that this will happen faster because as a collective, we're open to receive that information. We're not in resistance about, they're showing me that some people think they want disclosure, but what's happening is they want it. I have my eyes closed, and so I tend to get that football player look. What they're showing me is that people think they want disclosure, for example, or they think that they want it to happen in a certain way with certain people, with certain groups. They want the control of how it happens, who comes into this, how, all of that. And basically what they're showing me is let go of it and just allow it to happen organically, unless, of course, that's something we're involved in, and that's which we all are. How do I put this? That's like, let's say I'm a politician, and that's part of what I'm working towards and working with. That's not what they're saying. Like, don't just be like, all right, I'm out. Unless that's where your heart is telling you to go, then by all means. But meaning it's not for your highest and greatest good right now, and it doesn't feel in alignment with who you truly are, and you no longer wish to be a politician because you want to work with, children or something, and you want to be a teacher. I don't know. I'm just using these all as examples. You could be infinite with that. But what they're saying is, let's stop worrying about all of that, because that's actually putting a hold on everything. It puts a dam or a finger in the dam, right? It puts a kink in the hose. So the more we just release and let go, and you guys, this is as above, so below. It's like, they're showing me like there's a, very bright. Oh, that's too dark. Whew. I need to get some sunlight bulbs, I think. That's what I'm going to order. So what they're showing me is natural light bulbs, so it's not so... Right. So they're showing me a combination lock. We're all lined up, and many people have already gone around this or worked through it. But there's still a couple of groups or a collective portion of the collectives that they're just not letting things go, right? And we've all been there, I think, right? For some, it's easier than others. And they're showing that it's like, picture gears, and the gears are stuck in some cases. And it's like, we got to get enough people to get the gears unstuck so that once that gear comes around, everything's open over here. So it's trying to line up with this portal. So everything's connected. But the other message is that's already happened. I know. So... and they're going back to that whole play on words about when we change our perspective on something, it changes our alignment. So the gears line up, and then we line up better with, let's say, the solstice portal in the end of December. Let's say we line up better with which then lines up better with everything astrologically, so on and so forth. And it shifts the entire timeline. Because as a collective now, we're flowing more together. And even though we have our own unique individuality, they're showing me like a docking, like for charging. It allows us to dock in and line up better with that dock so that the full charge is received in a much more cohesive and coherent way. Okay, I'm just wondering, I'm making sure that we're I think that's pretty clear. So not only does our perspective and our alignment then become more, yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. We perceive bandwidths and time scales on a different astrological alignment than you do. You have a very adept knowledge of the stars, yet there are more layers interwoven than many even understand. For not all of the galaxies, play on words, galaxies are open for expansion, are open for awareness. So they're showing me that there's so much we don't know about these astrological alignments. We're only going based off of the information that we can see through the telescopes and through what our ancestors have shared with us. And while there is a lot of information, it isn't all there. So therefore, we don't know the bigger picture from the information that's been provided for us. Yet, when we allow ourselves to open, our own codex of information is then decoded. And we have these aha moments of momentous momentum, of momentumness force. So they're showing me like this G-force, like this huge influx of information. And that's also categorically refined according to, and this is all plan words, what it is that we are choosing to perceive, the choice points we make, the activations on a whole need, so there's so much I could go. I got a little off kilter here. We see through the time tubes. We are traveling in a tubular viscosity that many are not able to recognize or to perceive, for the perception is beyond the scope of what we have been taught. However, it is in an innate flow within the inner technology, within the inner weavings of the archaeology that you are now sitting within. This is reference to the structures on Earth, and it's also reference to our body structures. This is our archaeology. This is also a reference to genealogy, ark, like the Ark of the Covenant, which has to do with the heart and the pineal gland and a lot of that activation, implosion. The chakra system and the nadis all nod and point to the point access points. I'm seeing them somehow working like antennas. So let's say there's a huge satellite. And if you picture our chakras like satellites, it's like they're intuitively lining up and lining us up with certain information that is then received and processed. And this is one perspective of many, by the way. And what it does then is think of it as like they're saying it's not sonar, but think of it like as a sonar wave. It bounces off and then some of it gets through, okay? And it goes through this chakra system, which is also not as we have been taught. There is much more than meets the eye of the beholder. Lots of plays on words. So it then comes through in waves and it helps to wake up loose change is what they're saying. So I'm hearing wake up Lucille, wake up little Susie, wake up loose change, loose change, loose change. The jingle all the way. I'm seeing gold coins and value systems. I've got that. What's that song? The jingle in my pocket going jingle-ling-a-ling. Reference to the solstice, Christmas, but it's not Christmas. It's the actual pineal gland activation. So there's a lot going on here. Pituitary, wake up little Susie. I'm hearing Susie Q. The intercellular alignments, we use these words and terms interchangeably because they are interchangeably, and they're playing this back into when I set change in the pocket and all of that interchangeably. For as above, so below, as within, so without. Your many teachers and masters over the millennia lots more plays on words, have been teaching this for many eons, centuries, beyond time. However, there are many more that have not been revealed or shared in the time matrix that many of you sit within. However, your knowledge is connected to the knowledge of the center, the centripetal, the centripetal, the centripetal. There's like big all play on words right now. Force. So you are connected and tied in with that which is the nature in all things, the spirit that moves in all things, through all things, as all things, for you are that nature. You are that spirit. And as you nurture the process that you are in, as you nurture one another, you realize that the only door that you are knocking on is your own. And as this hearing knocking on heaven's door, and a lot of people are like, why can't I get in? It's because you're trying to get out of some place you already exist within, recognizing that all is within. So as we share these plays on words, and as we share these visual stimuli, we invite you to recognize that as a collective, as an individual in the collective, you are choosing where you would like the collective to travel to. So they're showing me loose change again. And I'm going to have to come back to this. So, the other word was like lose the change. Like, be the change you want to see in the world. Don't lose the change. It's loose change. Like, it's trying to wake us up. Like, hey, remember, you wanted to be love and light. Let's get back on course. And there's lots of different places that they're going with this. As your trajectories change, so do your concepts of time, your conceptualization. And they're showing me an egg. And this has been coming up a lot in the dream group that I connect with on Instagram. Redefining that which you perceive as your, they're showing me like egg, value, nutrition, creation, the story of creation, what we are creating, the theories that we are agreeing with, therefore changing our science-based discoveries. And they're reminding me to pull that back in, that recognizing we are steering the collective, we are steering the tornado. So if we want change to happen and we don't want to lose ourselves and we want sovereignty, they're saying play with that. Losing ourselves, losing our old way, our old bandages, like get rid of that, but don't lose ourselves in the shuffle. Like just relax so that more of ourself can be revealed. So they're tying it back in, and I keep losing because it's not losing the train of thought. I'm hearing like Duran Duran. There's a Duran Duran song that I'm hearing. Come undone. Huh. So as we come undone, we're undoing what we thought we needed to do in previous lifetimes, perceptions, realities. They're also reminding me that this does change the wave motion of the collective. So if we want to be on a certain timeline, then stop focusing on the timeline we don't want to be in. If we want disclosure, then stop focusing on exactly what we want disclosure in and just be more open to what is showing up. Because there's a lot of people out there that wants A, B, or C, fill in the blank, and it's been happening. It just hasn't happened again fast enough, quick enough, quick enough, in the way they thought it would with the people they thought it would. And that isn't the bigger picture. The bigger picture is well beyond all of that, and that's a play on words even. Well, goes deeper than and beyond. And they're showing me the chalice of the heart. So also recognizing that our physical bodies are a big part of this, because our physical body is our composition are changing. What we are comprising of, what we are made up of, what we are compromising in, what we are, so this is all a play on words. What we are, I'm going back into it because I'm hearing shadow speak. So usually I would just stop and I would write all this down, but what we are computating, how we are computating it, how we are computing it, right? How we are completing things. They're showing me that whole idea of time, where we have to go from point A to point B to point C to point, like it's very, it's out the window. So if we're still trying to accomplish things in that way, oh, I don't have a pause. Forgot I'm not on Zoom. If we're trying to accomplish things still in that way, we're in resistance. It doesn't necessarily feel as easy as it was before because it doesn't work that way anymore. If we're trying, and they're talking about the body again, if we're trying to eat the same foods that we've always eaten, yet we're getting sick from it, then we need to change. And that means going with the flow, not fighting and being in resistance, saying, but I read and someone told me that this is what I'm supposed to do. And they're showing me that this has to do with spirituality as well. So people think they have to go to church on this day, celebrate these holidays. Well, that's a whole other video because I see where they're going with that. And the question is, who told us? What teachers? Who wrote these books? Are they still applicable to the mode of transportation that we're in? So they're showing me it's like reading an instruction manual for a Ford when we're really driving a smart car. I guess a Ford does make a smart car. Let me rephrase that. They're showing me it's like reading an instruction model for a Model T when we're really in a Tesla. And we're like, why isn't this working? I read it. It's a good layout for a blueprint of how a car should operate. But it is not an operating manual for how we are right now. Those manuals are great and they got us where we are now. Yet we are creating a new operating system. So we may take bits and pieces of information from those texts and from those concepts, but we're also being invited to remember who wrote those texts. Men, women, who were also channeling information or getting information, downloading information, however it resonates, based on their perception at that time in that vehicle, on that version of Earth, in that timeline, with that collective, those groups of people, those beings, those everything of that time. And that is what they based those messages off of. So if they were to see some of the things that we have, they would not have any concept because they are basing it on their own reality structure, on their own filters, so to speak. And I could use a lot more examples with that. Not to say that it's wrong or inaccurate. It no longer holds water in some circumstances, situations, because it is an old structure that is bound to a certain dimensional frequency, also a density. So with those teachings, it holds a certain density and a certain pattern and framework that we've essentially now moved past and moved through. So as we move past and move through these layers, we are uncovering more bits, and I always see the word BYTS when I say this. We are uncovering more bits and frequency patterns that we can then, they're saying don't throw the old book away, right? Although a lot of it can be, but we can add to it. Okay, they want me to play with this a little bit, so I'm just going to talk about this, my highest aspect. I'm going to use the Bible as an example. The Bible had, let's say it had 5 books, Genesis, whatever, it had 5 books. Then all of a sudden another prophet or person in the Bible came along and they added a book. And then another person came along and they added their book. And then another person came along and they added their book. And then Jesus came along, right, in the New Testament, and he added his 6 cents instead of 2 cents. So now you have the Bible, and it's a complete version of all of these perspectives, vibrations, and messages that came through from God, Jesus, and other teachings, life experiences, so on and so forth. And that book is now complete, representing this particular earth density, vibration, generation, so on and so forth. Now, certain things like golden rule, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not lie, right? There are some foundational principles that are in the Bible that are huge. They're obviously important, and pretty much all of Jesus's teachings, right? Not pretty much, all of Jesus's teachings. But what happened was, from what they're showing me, is now, let's say some person comes in and says, well, that's no longer relevant. So we're going to delete that and add this in. Yet that was coming from their perspective on that timeline, on that reality, and from that density. So now they came in and wiped that clean and put those two together, and now it represents something slightly different than it represented before. And it became, in a lot of cases, chunks of the Bible were removed, and chunks of it were, what's the right word? Like, added to. You know, there were some changes that were made. If you look online and see how many versions of the Bible there are, you will see that that's obviously a truth. So many versions. And if I try to read an interpretation of just one paragraph in one book of the Bible, in Deuteronomy, for example, I will get 20 different, not parables, but different definitions. This is what it means. And there all will be a slight tweak to it, right? A slightly different version. And we're in the process of doing that all of the time. We're getting the information and we're saying that was relevant. Now, what they're saying is, obviously want to keep the foundation of the principles of love. Thou shalt, not covet. Thou shalt not lie. Those are things that, but we know this. So let's take that to the next level, is what they're saying. We don't have to go back in and change anything that was written. And that's what this message is we're not changing any of that. We're not changing the Bible and saying the true word from it. We're just now creating our own expansion of our own manual. So now we're in a new golden era. There isn't a manual, is what they're showing me, that can then say, these are what the rules are for this new golden era. Although there are basic rules, which are do unto others, which are carried over from all of our teachers. So they're saying don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't know if I'm using the right example, but they're saying don't throw this out, yet recognize that we're creating this. Now, in order to create it accurately, they're showing me like a map, a topographer, like a map, uses an Acura symbol to create the accurate mapping system. And that's why it's so important. They keep talking about be in a space of coherence, be in a space of bliss, which bliss isn't like, oh, everything is love and light. Sometimes it can be, but it's like, this makes me really happy. I feel harmonized and balanced and joyful and in gratitude. And it's just really stabilizing frequency in this energy. And from that space, if we're open, all of this information is able to then unfold, and we're able to see it from that perspective rather than just perceiving it from an overly emotional or overly angry or overly fill in the blank perspective that then changes the color of the message, right? the vibration of the message just slightly. It tweaks it just a little bit. And there's so many layers to this, you guys. This is just one message. And the other message is there's so many perspectives. And that's what's so beautiful about this is all of these different interpretations are based on where we're vibrating at. One person might say, I just read this and this is what I got out of it. And another person's going to say, oh, but this is what I got out of it. And they'll both be right. And they're going to utilize that and build on that. And it's really a cool, I don't know if I'm saying this in the quite the most eloquent of ways, but okay. And as these old belief systems collapse about what we are, what we think we are, as we all come together and unify as creatures of oneness, they're showing me like all creatures, great and small. Recognizing that we're all here to align with something greater. And as we do this and we recognize that the uniqueness and the individuality is part of the beauty of Mother Earth. Earth, they're showing Earth to me as this mother that is like, come one, come all. You are all one to me because you're all my children. And I appreciate you because you have stripes, and I appreciate you because you have spots, and I appreciate you because you have stripes and spots. And ultimately, you're all my children, and you can all express yourself, but Mother Earth is showing like, but you're all on this earth together. So rather than saying, well, I'm right because I have stripes, and I'm right because I have spots, and I'm right because I'm a little bit of both, let that all just kind of integrate. And we can express different ideas and theories and opinions and all of that. You guys, a lot of stuff going on in the crown. In our own unique way and not force it onto somebody else, not pressure someone else to go this direction, not calling someone out as wrong, when in truth, there is no proof that anybody is right in many different situations. And that, I'm not going to get into that. They're showing me lots of examples, but it doesn't matter. I think the message is somewhat clear. And this is pertinent to what's going on now because we're in this process of retrieval, is what they keep sharing. We're in a golden retrieval, right? We're in this process of retrieving, taking back what is ours in sovereignty, retrieving information, receiving information, but retrieving has a completely different meaning and connotation, obviously, than receiving. So it's like we're picking it back up, right? And we're now creating completely new time zones, timelines, and creations because of it. So the more we can be back in that flow, in that creative expression, in the creative flow, the more all of this will happen with more clarity, precision, bliss, and love. And it's not to say that like somebody might say, well, this works for me, so I'm going to stay working with that particular fill in the blank entity, food, teaching, Bible. You know, they only want to listen to Christ's teachings, and that's okay too if that is working for them. What they're showing me is if it's not, then that's a sign that maybe it's time to try something different or to open up to new things and to get out of resistance. Again, if it's not working, right, we're in resistance and perhaps being a little stubborn about something. It could be resistance that we need to try something new, but it could also be resistance that this is trying to teach us something in a different way or teach us something new that we might be blocking or we haven't changed our perspective. We haven't changed our perception. So therefore, we are unable to see from a broader perspective, perhaps what that same teacher is teaching us from a different angle. So they're kind of using the example of Jesus. We can learn Jesus's teachings again, like Eckhart Tolle, not that I'm comparing the two. Eckhart's a very great teacher, right? But what I'm saying is, I might read the Bible when I'm 10 and get a completely different concept from a completely different perspective than when I'm 21, and so on and so forth. So it's the same concept. And what worked for me when I was 10, maybe I need to put that aside for a minute, see something else, and then come back to it with fresh eyes and go, oh, this is what I was missing a day ago, a year ago, 2 weeks ago, 10 years ago, whatever. Or this is what I'm now able to perceive because I had this experience happen. And they're leading it back to the beginning of this conversation, which was little rocks. So if I hadn't picked up that little rock, I wouldn't have noticed that it was rose quartz. I would not have then chosen to look up the information about rose quartz. Therefore, I never would have then been led to the crystal store that carried rose quartz. Then I never would have gotten lost along the way and found this restaurant that I loved, and never would have tried this food that has changed my life, and never would have met the cook that cooked the food that now I'm friends with on Instagram. I'm using this as an example of how it works, and it's so like layered, 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 layered in so many ways that it's infinite. And if everybody's following this bliss, they're somewhat of an spontaneous, right, in the flow moment from a place of coherence, not from, from the truth and the heart, and not from, they're showing me unresolved trauma. Like, some people are making choices based on unresolved trauma, and then they don't understand why nothing is working, or they're unable to hear their higher self. There's so much, and that's another video, because I'm going to end on this note. And in love and light, I'm trying to make my videos a little shorter so that we can have the time to really kind of digest it all. Thank you so much. Namaste.